What's new? What's next? And what does it mean for your business? Welcome to the 2021 Shelly Palmer Innovation Series Summit, featuring Samsung Electronics CMO, Wanda Young, Facebook's Vice President Global Business Group, Carolyn Everson, Google AI Product Lead, Barak Turovsky, the Shelly Palmer 2021 Trends and Insights Report, and much, much more. And now, your host, CEO of the Palmer Group, Shelly Palmer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelly Palmer, CEO of the Palmer Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Innovation Series Summit. I'd like to thank our announcer, AI voiceover British female. It's a text-to-speech AI that was modeled after a British female voice. And I'd also like to thank the composer of our theme music, Iva, which is an initialism for Artificial Intelligence Virtual Artist. We'll talk much more about AI throughout the summit. We have an exceptional group of guests today. I'm going to chat with Samsung Electronics CMO Wanda Young about Samsung's commitment to innovation. Google AI product lead Barak Turovsky will share his thoughts about the incredible advances we've seen in AI this past year and what's coming next. And Facebook's Vice President Global Marketing Carolyn Everson and I will have a frank conversation about the pandemic, Facebook, and business. But before we get started, look, the politics of the last couple of weeks have made an incredibly tough year even tougher. We're going to have to talk about politics today. The subject is unavoidable. But I think it's just as important to acknowledge the immense toll the pandemic has taken. So many lives lost, so many heartbreaking stories. Truly no one's unaffected, but I'm hopeful. While it's true America's healthcare system is being stretched to its limits, and while it's also true that COVID-19 cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are at an unacceptable level, there's some good news. There are several different vaccines being dispensed, and there's been a great deal of progress with therapeutics. Conventional wisdom says that we're going to be in for a long winter, but between the vaccine program and improvements in treatment protocols, we should begin to emerge from the pandemic towards the end of 2021. McKinsey has a well-researched article on the subject. Now, look, I have no way of knowing if this is true or it's just wishful thinking, but it's the time frame that's most often quoted. A lot can happen between now and then, and no matter how tough times are right now, and no matter what this looks like, the pandemic will ultimately end. When it does, we're going to be in a new world with new challenges and new opportunities. Some people, myself included, like to say we've experienced something like 10 years of social innovation in the past 10 months. That's a great soundbite, but how will that accelerated innovation change the way we spend our days? What will the new normal look like? What's going to go back to the way it was? And what's changed forever? A good place to start is right here, right now. Most every one of you is sitting in front of some version of a TV studio, whether it's your smartphone, your laptop, or something more elaborate. I am too. The 2021 Shelly Palmer Innovation Series Summit is being streamed live from a spare bedroom in my apartment that I converted into a combination home office and 4-camera video studio. Let's do a quick tour. I got a couple different shots set up here. This is my, he's a tech consultant shot. You can notice the dashboards and blinking lights in the background and all the whiz-dings. Just got to spin around here, a quick tap on the foot pedal, and I'm ready for my let's have an interview shot on Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever. Camera 3 is an old HD Handycam on a boom arm. That's for product demos. And camera 4 is my smartphone, so I can do some handheld shots. Camera 1, camera 2, the lighting and the audio are all studio quality. And the broadband connection here is the best that Fios has to offer. Is this the future? It certainly is the present. We're streaming this live on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and LinkedIn Live. Welcome, everybody. Please introduce yourself on chat, tell us where you're watching from, and feel free to ask questions. Also, please chat with each other. That's the coolest part of this whole thing. So again, we're streaming this on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and LinkedIn Live. And when we're done, it'll be available on demand. The most important thing about this setup and this workflow is that it's not unique. All of you have the power to do this with the kit you have in front of you right now. So let's think about what that means. Will you start hosting your own shows? Some of you already do. Will you start creating and hosting your own seminars and summits? Many of you already do. Video conferencing is here to stay, and it's already having a fairly dramatic impact on business travel, business culture, business decision-making, business development, career development. I'll argue that there is no aspect of our lives that will not be forever changed by the video capabilities we've all been forced to learn during the pandemic. So what does that mean? Are we going to need video rooms in our homes? Will we need to divide our living spaces in new ways? Will you need to video equip your home office? How about a video equipped homeschooling space or a video equipped workout or recreational space? Will the cameras always be on, or will they be voice controlled? Is this just something we need to do for a few more months until life gets back to normal, or at least till it gets back to the new normal? And what will that look like? In our 2020 Trends and Insights report, I wrote about the super aging of America, how some states were already close to having 20% of their population over the age of 65. In just a year, two things have really changed. First, the pandemic has taken so many seniors that government statisticians believe it will reduce the average life expectancy in the United States by 1.13 years. But averages rarely, if ever, tell a meaningful story, and this stat is no exception. There's no such thing as an average COVID victim. Demographically, white Americans will see lifespans reduced by roughly 8 months. Black and Latino populations will see declines of roughly 2 and 3 years, respectively. Among other things, this will impact every investment thesis regarding super-aged audience segments. It's going to change calculations across a wide range of categories, from broadcast television to pharma to CPG to healthcare. And the follow-on stats add even more uncertainty. The 2010s were projected to be the decade of big city growth, but the new U.S. Census Bureau data tells a completely different story. The migration out of the major metropolitan areas began a few years ago, but the pace has clearly picked up this year. And the big questions are easy to ask. Can you make a living outside the city? And can a city person find happiness as a country person? I'm sure each of you has your own story that you can tell. From a work perspective, this migration is empowered by technology, and the tech is getting better every day. What does this mean for the future of major metros, for the future of work, politics, tax rolls? The list of follow-on effects is vast. And while we're thinking about video, let's take a minute to talk about what's happening to the business of television. In 2006, I wrote a book called Television Disrupted: The Transition from Network to Networked TV. Aside from patting myself on the back for predicting how and when the current streaming transition would happen, and aside from blatantly, shamelessly plugging the book, which you can find on Amazon, by the way, the book explored the impact democratized production technology would have on the then nascent digital on-demand economy. And it also posited the amplification of the attention economy. Back in 2006, the thesis of the book, The Transition from Network to Networked TV, was a purely intellectual exercise. The technology simply didn't exist. To be honest, predicting that everyone would have their own personalized streams of democratized on-demand content really didn't prepare me for the emotional impact that the transition was going to have. Look, from the first cave painting to the present, the job of every piece of content ever created was and is to get your attention. It almost goes without saying that time is everyone's scarcest resource. So it's easy to understand why the accelerated and unprecedented volume and velocity of content has totally changed the rules of engagement. Now, more than ever, only the most extreme content, and you can define that for yourself, is able to cut through the clutter. The consequences of this extremification are obvious. Add in new AI-assisted production techniques, and you've got a deepfake Christmas message from the Queen.
So much of our world today comes to us through these screens, which brings me back to that question of trust, of whether what we see and hear is always as it seems. On behalf of myself, your Queen, and all at Channel 4, I trust you will have the very merriest of Merry Christmases.
There's a lot of hype about AI. Let's just say you'll find these two letters in way more product descriptions than you should. But just because marketers have decided to abuse the initialism doesn't mean that we haven't seen real advances this past year. OpenAI's GPT-3, the third generation of the generative pre-trained transformer, can do a wide array of NLP tasks, such as writing in the style of Shakespeare, or writing reports, resumes, instruction manuals, translating plain language descriptions into computer programming languages like HTML or JavaScript, and a whole bunch more. We could spend the whole summit just talking about GPT-3. Can it pass the Turing test? It did pretty well, but remember, the Turing test isn't for computers to pass. it's for humans to fail. At last year's summit, we showed some examples of the most convincing deepfakes we could find. So let's have a quick look at the state of the art.
America. You blame me for interfering with your democracy, but I don't have to. You are doing it to yourselves. Polling stations are closing. You don't know who to trust. You are divided. There are strings we can pull, but we don't have to. You are pulling them for us.
The first time I met him, I go, he comes up to me and he had his cigar in his mouth and he goes, what is Jeff and Peter? That's his hair and makeup guys. Yeah. And I go, I don't know, I'll find them. And he goes, find them, show me your leadership capabilities.
Yep, now you can look and sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger. These capabilities are very close to becoming commoditized. For some quick examples, just Google AI voiceover generators. Some of the better ones are already good enough to voice an audiobook or an instructional video. There are just a remarkable number of things you can do with AI, but there are an equally remarkable number of things you can't do with it. Here are a couple paintings created by AI. There are several galleries that feature unique original works. Some sell for thousands of dollars. Is this art? That's your call. As you know, this is the time of year we publish our Trends and Insights report. You can visit shellypalmer.com to sign up for early access. This year's report acknowledges the known unknowns and offers a framework to help you answer key questions. Many trends, like working from home, issues with vaccination distribution and adoption, and government regulation of big tech, are easy to see. We've tried to dig a little deeper, and we think this year's work will enhance your decision-making and help you create value for your business. Again, you can visit shellypalmer.com to request early access. With over 20% of the television market and almost 23% of the smartphone market, Samsung is a dominant force in consumer electronics worldwide. The products Samsung makes help shape how we live, how we work, and how we play. So I'm super excited to introduce my good friend, Wanda Young, CMO at Samsung Electronics America. Wanda, wow, these are really challenging times. Thanks so much for being here.
Shelly, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for having me.
And I don't want to harp too much on it. We've had political challenges, we have medical challenges, we have societal challenges, we have economic challenges, and all of them have really had a giant impact in the way consumers approach everything. And as a chief marketing officer, this has to be challenging too. And I just wondered out loud, and I want to just ask you, what are the changes that you've seen that have been most impactful?
We've spent so much time just trying to get closer to our customers, and we're doing a ton of just daily listening. And it goes all of the way, obviously we're in the US, but as we go back and listen to customers even around the world and compare notes, it has affected everyone everywhere. And that's been the one common theme. We talk to all of our countries, and it has been truly a global pandemic. And while that sounds, okay, that's common and simple, it's not. It has really been the thing that has been so stunning to see how heartfelt everyone has commonly felt that this is the thing that has leveled us across the board. And when we look at what that means as it relates to, like, what does it change in terms of how we've reacted as a company to, we've realized that, consumer tech, it has to do more. And that means that as we think about the way that we develop our products, we had to start looking at what was in our pipeline and how were we going to change the way we brought things to market. So here's maybe an interesting statistic for you. We started observing the behavior that we had on some of our existing devices, and 30% of people started washing their clothes more. Well, why? Because we care about being more clean, more hygienic, as people, even though they stayed home, wanted to just show that they're cleaning more, that they're being more sanitary and more hygienic, right? And so one of the things that led to for us is to realize that we should be deploying some of our own AI into how we are using that technology in things like our washing machines. And so part of what we do at CES is we're talking about our AI-powered washing machines to use that intelligence in how we innovate with our own basic home appliances. And it's coming from this type of change.
Yeah, most people, when they think about Samsung's use of AI, they think about it in the context of the AI models Samsung trained to upconvert video. By the way, everybody, if you haven't seen Samsung television sets convert regular HD to 8K, you owe it to yourself to check it out. I promise you, it's worth your time. It's a really just a great AI use case. But let's switch gears for a second. Wanda, let's talk about 5G.
One of the things that I was talking with you about, I don't know how many months ago, is we were saying, is 5G moving fast enough in this world? And I don't mean the speed of 5G. We were talking about how does it get deployed faster? How do we get access to 5G? And more importantly, who's getting access to 5G? And so Samsung is a leader in deploying 5G. And I think that one of the stories that hasn't been told quite enough is that we actually own the patents, more patents than anyone else in the world. But interestingly enough, a lot of people don't understand that we're deploying and building the 5G networks in the US. So it's interesting that we were the first handset maker to bring 5G to the US. But as you watch in the marketplace, one of the things you were talking about is like, man, I just don't see it moving fast enough. That's one of the things that you've been saying for quite a while, right? But now what we've been talking about is how does it move faster into more places? And so 5G Link, it's one of the things we're actually working on with Verizon. And so as an example, I'm here inside 837. I told you many, many months ago about the fact that we wanted to have this building outfitted, and now it does have 5G in it. And so the ability to have buildings outfitted with it as a closed loop network so that buildings are operating as a closed loop network. And so that's going to happen for more facilities, hospitals, institutions, so that it can enable the power of it. And so it's not just about when you're on the go with mobile technology, but it works for buildings. But it's also about rural areas. We are working to make sure that it's getting deployed with rural areas, working with AT&T, and then also using it for radio networks. So I think that thing that we talked about so many months ago about the fact that it's got to get to as many places, as much access for all, I think it's happening now. And so I feel much more positive about where it's headed. And hopefully you do too.
No, I'm a big 5G is inevitable. There's no question about that. We are going to live in a 5G world. The question is, how are we going to get there and who's going to lead? Clearly, you guys have taken a giant position in 5G, as has Verizon and all the carriers. We know it's coming. The consumer benefits as they roll out, they're exciting. They truly are. Some of it, as you know, I've said, and I'm not going to go back on what I've said at all. It's 95% marketing hype and 5% marketing hype. Maybe now it's only like 4% marketing hype. There's some good 5G stuff. Look, thinking about the way consumers approach everything. The actual capability of 5G is only good if you've got apps and streaming and content that's coming at you on screens that you care about. Talk to me about that a little bit.
This is what was interesting. We keep doing research, as you know. We talk to consumers all the time. We're doing primary research. We do observed research. We look at behavioral data on our devices, the tablets, phones, et cetera. Do you know like 67% of Americans now are doing gaming of all kinds? And so you've got, your hardcore gamer, your casual gamer, et cetera. And so we really had to take another step back and say, we have to do more. And so it's everything from, our hardcore gaming monitors, but even just as you look at like our QLED TVs, we have built a gaming bar now so that when you are on this beautiful, 75-inch device, you can pull up your gaming bar in order to be able to change the aspect ratios because you never know, Shelly, who's around that corner that's going to shoot you. It's really important. You're going to lose if you don't have the ability to look around the corner. And so that's what we've learned from visiting with our gaming influencers. They've taught us these things. And that's one of the observed behaviors. We were already in the space, but through COVID and people spending time at home, you do have to have these escape mentality in order to, this is where the American public has gone. I couldn't believe these numbers as we started looking at it. And then again, it was observed behavior as we looked on what we've seen with all of our devices. And so when we look at how that has changed, it really has been stunning. And even as we talk about the difference between applications like that or streaming, and we look at the other aspect of where this has gone, fitness was the other place as it relates to apps. And we had done some there, but really the next place that we knew that we needed to go is to leverage how people could do more. And again, it's back to home, health, fitness, hygiene. And that's why we talked to you about how you could have this trainer and use your big screen TV in order to really get fit. Because why are you not leveraging this device for as many things that you could do for both entertainment as well as to have training and to have on-demand fitness training? So those are the other places where we've taken applications because, again, consumer is showing us this is what they want. They're telling us, and we're listening and observing, and it's all changing the way the technology has got to evolve. So we're trying to make sure that we're listening and observing, and I think that's honestly about this kind of whole concept of just the flexible home, and honestly, the fact that tech has got to follow. Right.
I think, look, Wanda, I think everybody's got some anecdotal story about the way they've changed their consumption of media. You go to bed at night, you used to turn on the TV set if you were a certain age, and you'd, watch television in the evening. Kids would watch their laptop or their handheld or their tablet sitting on the couch next to you, if they would consider sitting next to you. And everybody sort of has adopted different, based on their ages, different preferences. All of that seems to have changed. If you talk to people right now, people are going to bed and they're taking out their handheld and they're watching some videos before they go to bed, or what would have been prime time. And then you see all of a sudden this massive 4K video streaming world where you can finally, over the top, get these magnificent images and finally take advantage of the set that, you bought a 4K set and you had a 2K cable. It was no fun at all. With so much going on, what do you think is next? Like, how does this all manifest itself? And the follow-on to that question is, what does our audience need to know about the way this is changing and the way that they need to adapt and the way that you guys are adapting?
The interesting part about where it's all going is that the flexibility of devices that can actually flip its duality, I think, is one of the key trends. That's what I'm seeing. This concept I just mentioned a little bit ago about how I was in the middle of my workday, but I wanted to be able to shift into news mode. And so I took my remote and shifted it into TV on the smart monitor. It's that same concept where I just talked about the big screen TV, where I'm going to be able to flip it into gaming mode because I want to do gaming now. Those aspect ratios changing, and then I'm going to move it into fitness mode, and I'm going to do a live training session with my trainer. The same thing is happening as it relates to retail. So we've got, I'm in a retail space right now. It's not currently being used because we closed it, but we use it we have live virtual agents. And so we're the first consumer electronics retailer to be using live virtual agents to help you with actually completing your purchase. But we also know with research, consumers still prefer, believe it or not, to go into store and purchase. They still want to pick up the device, and particularly if you're looking at they're still getting to measure and see if that, range, refrigerator, washer, it fits. And if we're talking about some of our flexible, customizable units where you can actually see the color, they prefer physical retail. That is still what they're telling us with research. So what's the next evolution of that is our ability to actually show them and take them through the space. And so we're looking at how that can become a real shopping environment. And so the virtual shopping experience that's actually good, if you understand what I mean.
I do. As opposed to that other virtual experience, which is no fun at all.
It's just not been good. And so these are the types of experiences that we're exploring because we're trying to, again, meet the customer's needs where they are and what they're asking us for. Because what they've definitely shown us is they have definitely shown us with their clicks that they want the information from us, that they want to buy from us, and the direct-to-consumer ability to do every form of omni-channel with us. And so we've just got to evolve faster in order to get there with them. And so that is definitely what we're trying to do. And I think that opportunity to actually leverage with AI, with virtual experiences, is just needing to move faster. And so I think that what we're talking about is make it happen quicker. Because their safety is paramount, is the real key.
Sure. Sure. What's new and exciting? What this is CES. This is technically the week that everybody just descends on Las Vegas. And of course we're not. We're doing it virtually. What?
Thank God. Thank God I'm not there. Oh my God, I was so happy this time to actually not be flying to Vegas this time. How many years has it been that you've not been in, right, Vegas?
I have to tell you, this past week, Facebook will send memories, as you know, where were you 5 years ago, 6 years ago? So many pictures of CES, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I like to complain about Las Vegas. It's my favorite thing to do is just complain about how much.
Absolutely, every January.
Can't stand it. It's because I'd love to be there right now. I really would. But anyway, notwithstanding, what's super exciting to you personally?
I remember being there so many years ago and seeing self-driving auto technology. And thinking, as the cars were trapped, in their little boxes on the floor, and thinking, it's really interesting. I'm not really sure, again, similar, when will we actually be using them and really seeing those deployed? And sitting here in New York, still don't see that happening, right? Was looking at our little vacuum cleaner here that is on our floor, and we use LiDAR technology, which is the self-driving cars, sure. Technology. And as I look at where I think that the convergence of the technology movement is going, of things like LiDAR specifically, those are the places where it's like, where does that get deployed in small spaces? It may seem small to you, but I think that one of the things that we've said for so long is that technology that's helpful, technology that is human, technology that makes a difference in the everyday person's life, it's not the CESs where you go there and it's the untouchable, where it actually makes no difference to anybody and it's so far off that you actually never see it deployed. Those are actually the smaller things. You and I had the conversation about what's the breakthrough things. Sometimes it's actually the smaller things. It's actually when I see LiDAR getting deployed in a robotic vacuum that is smart enough to know, do not drag yourself through my pet's home mess because it's that smart, just using that type of technology. That's actually the places where I'm like, this is the intelligent design that I'm looking to see get deployed, because there are far more people who are going to leverage and use that in their homes, because that's actually where you actually see it getting used. And so you may think it's funny, but
I actually agree.
I believe those are the places where it actually means it's making a difference in someone's life.
Wanda, thanks so very, very much. Wanda Young, CMO, Samsung Electronics Americas. Again, thanks for being so gracious with your time.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to seeing you again.
Two quick things. One, please join our daily mailing list. Each morning, I write my take on the news of the day. We include links and a synopsis of the stories that we're paying attention to. It's free and you can sign up at shellypalmer.com. Thing two, you're invited to join PGX. It's a community of subject matter experts focused on business, tech, culture, and innovation, and you can sign up at pgx.tech. Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to listen to me right up to the point where you agree with me or you don't. Then either you'll find something else to do, or if I have your attention, you'll post a comment that espouses your worldview. This sounds great, except it isn't great. Because whether you agree with me or not, a huge percentage of you won't listen past the point where your personal biases are confirmed. If what I'm saying is inside your comfort zone, you'll stop listening because we see eye to eye. If my words are outside your comfort zone, you're going to stop listening because you don't want to be uncomfortable. It gets worse. The echo chambers created by our confirmation biases are filled with narratives designed to blanket us in the comfort of the information we want to hear. Objective truth is getting harder and harder for humans to uncover. So how will it ever be possible for AI to figure it out? What can we expect from natural language processing? What are the limitations of neural networks? What is the state of the art and where's it going? It's my pleasure to introduce Google AI product lead Barak Turovsky, who's here to help us dig just a little bit deeper into deep learning. Barak, take it away.
I'm Barak Turovsky, and I lead the Languages AI product team within Google AI org. I'm very excited to present the latest and greatest developments in Languages AI that will have profound impact on many industries and business cases. First of all, I wanted to kind of explain a bit what Languages AI means. On a high level, it's just much better natural language understanding, what we call NLU. And if you abstract it and oversimplify it, it's mostly consists with two big use cases. The first one is monolingual language understanding, just understanding in one language, let's say English. That means understanding text, understanding speech, in just one language. The second big bucket is translation, which is effectively bilingual language understanding, understanding language A and translating the text or speech to language B. So those are the two big series of use cases related to natural language understanding. Now, why language understanding is so important? Well, in the world of technology, our goal is to help user manage the world with technology through the power of language. And not surprisingly, language understanding is a critical component of many technology products. For example, Google Search, it's all about language understanding. There is a lot of other Google products like Gmail and YouTube, etc., where language understanding is a critical component because at the end of the day, people seek information or communicate. All this requires language understanding. Now, language understanding might sound very simple because languages, when people learn languages, it comes naturally, so to speak. You start learning a language when you're a child, and it sounds very simple. But when you look at it, and especially when you start to understand how machines who are not humans, how they can understand languages, it's actually extremely complex because our languages are hard. They have rules and exceptions to the exceptions, and rules to the exceptions. And the way we communicate could be ambiguous. For example, a sentence I'm learning Go could have multiple meanings. It could be programming language, or it could be learning a game. It could be various ways to express yourselves. For example, I work for Google has more or less the same meaning as Google employs me. Language is also evolving. For example, this not even very readable slang word in Italian means I like you very much, and this is a real world. TV, TTTTB. It also could be very contextual. They were out, for example, could have multiple meanings. So that's just a series of examples to show you that if you look at the blank state, like machines start to learn language, language is extremely complex and hard. Therefore, what languages AI is, on a high level, what it is, it's basically using deep neural networks on huge amounts of training data, and a couple of big use cases or examples of technologies, deep neural network technologies that are used on this front. One is bi-directional encoder representations from transformers. It's a very long name, and we in short call it BERT. That's basically neural network-based technique for natural language understanding pre-training, and I will expand on it because it's becomes one of the critical technologies in monolingual language understanding. And the second one is neural machine translation, or what we call NMT. That's a technique that uses deep neural networks to translate from language A to language B. So let's go a little bit deeper into each one of them. So in terms of monolingual language understanding, only recently, state-of-the-art architecture for languages AI was what was called recurrent neural networks. Recurrent neural networks process words sequentially. This works very well modeling short sequences like sentences, but they struggle with making abstract associations because in many cases, abstract associations requires to understand the context of multiple sentences, paragraphs, or even an entire story. Now, in 2017, we made a leap forward with our research on transformers, models that can process, or they actually process words in parallel. And 1 year later, in 2018, we used it as a foundation for a technique we called bi-directional encoding representation from transformers, again, BERT. Now, BERT models can consider the full context of a word by looking at the words that come before and after it. Now, BERT models are also pre-trained using plain text from the web and other textual sources. On a high level, we use the same technique we use for search. We crawl the web in finding relevant text, publicly available text, and we use it for training of BERT. To do that, we actually use a process to train it that is a little bit like Mad Libs. For example, what we do is that we hide about 20% of the input words, and we train the model to guess those missing words. So for example, in this example, as you can see, we hit the words like grass and habitats and cold, ground, marble, small. Now, when we train BERT in this way, it can actually predict missing words in text. But this is generally on its own is not that useful. However, what it turns out is that when you train a model in this way on billions and billions of words of text, then this model learns an enormous amount of language understanding and word knowledge. To some extent, in similar way like human process enormous amount of information over the years and start basically forming language understanding and knowledge about the world. And this approach is much more effective at understanding language versus previous recurring neural networks approach, because the model can now learn what we call general concepts and apply them rather than just memorizing facts. Let's try to use an example. In this particular case, we have a task that we do care about. For example, let's say we would like to be able to answer questions from a paragraph. Here is a question, and there is a paragraph that we can kind of extract the question from. So what we do is that we take the question and a paragraph that may contain the answer, and we want to generate the span of text. Like we want to generate specific chunks of text. In this particular case, it could be voles, raccoons, and scones. That's basically the answers to the question. And we look to generate those spans of text. We might have a few hundred thousands to million examples that were created by humans that might contain a potential answer or might not contain an answer. And now we can train a neural network to do this. This is the way that question answering system in general have been trained for a number of years. Since the question answering system and BERT are both based on deep neural network, we can actually initialize our question or our answering system with BERT. So we basically combine those two together. Then we can train this on our question answering. We can train this on our question answering system just as we did before. But since BERT already has such deep language understanding and word knowledge, we can now answer new questions that we've never seen before, much better than we could previously. In this particular example, BERT already learned the association between grass and the ground, and as well as things like mammals and voles. So now when he understands this world knowledge and those pretty complex associations, BERT can now learn to answer a question like this, even if it hasn't been, those words actually were not in the question answering training data. And this is a big step forward because we now effectively train with very little to no direct training data, because there is some association and understanding about the world, about the language and understanding about the world. So that's pretty breakthrough technology. One additional pretty amazing technology in bilingual natural language understanding is obviously neural machine translation. And on a high level, the difference between our previous machine translations that we called machine learning 1.0 is that in each, we would take a chunk of no more of 5 words. We would break each sentence into this chunk, and we translate each chunk separately. Now, in neural machine translation, we take the entire sentence as a whole, and in the future, we might be able to take more than just one sentence. We might take entire paragraph. That allows us to better understand the context. It allows us to reorder the sentence in much better way to be able to create much better translation that also sound much more natural. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of examples of the profound impact that neural networks has on language understanding. So the first example is from Google search, where BERT helps better understand the subtle language nuances. For example, in this query, we have a query, can you get medicine for someone? Pharmacy. So any human would definitely understand that the intent behind this query is whether you can pick up a prescription for someone else. But prior to this change, our language understanding was not the best, and none of the results that we would show were particularly useful. We were just showing general results about how to fill the prescription. Those are not completely directly related to the query, because specifically the ask is how I can fill a prescription for someone else. With BERT, we are able to better understand the meaning of the relationship of for someone in relation to the rest of the sentence. And therefore, we can provide much more relevant result. As you can see on the right, the result is, can a patient have a friend or family member pick up a prescription? Much more useful. In this example, again from Google search, BERT helps to better understand the intent behind your search. So here, the query is 2019 Brazil travel to USA needs a visa. So the word to and its relationship to the other word in the query are super important here to fully understand the meaning of the query. It's about a Brazilian traveling to the US and not the other way around. Previously, our algorithms would not fully understand the importance of this connection to the query, and we return results about US citizens traveling to Brazil. With BERT, however, we now can search is able to grasp this nuance and know that the very common word to actually matters a lot here, and therefore Google search can provide a much more relevant result for this query. Again, it sounds very, very non-trivial, even for a first or second grader, but languages are very complex to machines. And this understanding of those nuances is very critical and allow us to create a much, much better search experience. And here, as you can see at the bottom, there is a quote from Pandu Nayak, who is the VP responsible for search ranking for many, many years, more than 15 years. And he specifically said that with BERT, those changes represent the biggest leap forward in the past 5 years and one of the biggest leaps forward in the history of search. This just shows you the profound impact that we can do to create a much better search experience. Let's go to next example. This is a bilingual example related to neural machine translation. As you can see here, it shows the quality of translations across multiple languages in a previous system called phrase-based, because we, as I mentioned, we were breaking the sentence, artificially breaking the sentence into chunks, versus neural. As you can see, a lot of languages before were not very usable, and now they're jumping to good or higher, or they were good and now we're jumping, the quality is going to excellent. So in this particular case, you can see some of the languages are very excited, as for example, Indian languages like Marathi, the third from the left. It was barely usable and now it jumped to be very, very good. Obviously, a lot of languages like European languages or Arabic languages, we had a significant jump. Look at Russian, that was good and now it's excellent. Look at languages like Indonesian and others. So we are very excited about that. Was the biggest single launch of neural machine translation resulted in biggest jump in translation quality in the last 10 years combined. So very excited about it. One additional thing to mention is that it's not only improving the quality of translation, but it also helps the translation to be much more natural, sound like much more like a human, not like a machine. In this particular example from German, as you can see, that in the old system, phrase-based, the phrase was translated as "no problem can be solved from the same consciousness that they have arisen." This sentence, even though it might be translated correctly, but it takes a lot of mental load for people to actually understand what it means, because it's not a proper, grammatically proper English. And as you can see in neural machine translation, the translation is much, much better, but and much more natural. Problems can never be solved with the same way of thinking that caused them. Okay, now let's talk about what's next for languages AI. One of the most exciting developments that before, both BERT for monolingual and neural machine translation would use huge amounts of data, and now we're getting to a point that we're using humongous amounts of data, humongous AI models. So as an example, in translation, we have a new system that we recently published called Massively Multilingual Massive Machine Translation. It's a very long, fancy name. Called, in short, we call it M4. The idea here is that you take data across all languages, you build one humongous models across all languages, and let those deep neural networks basically learn from all those languages. And as you can see, you see pretty significant jump in translation quality. So on the left side, you can see languages that we call high resource languages. It means that they have a lot of training data already. And on the right side, you see the low resource languages that we don't have a lot of data. As you can see, when you move from 400 million parameters of training to 6 billion parameters of training, and then to 50 billion parameters of training, you see pretty significant jump in quality. There is a huge jump in high resource languages, meaning languages where we have significant training data already. But also we are improving significantly in low resource languages, and particularly in languages that we have not yet launched because the quality was not there. Google Translate today supports 100 languages that cover 99% of online population, but there is 7,000 languages on Earth. And with this development, we could potentially launch more languages quickly, including languages that before we could not launch. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. And back to you, Shelly.
What's new? What's next? And what does it mean for your business? That's what we do here at the Palmer Group. We create value by keeping you up to date on the latest technological trends and helping you make the knowledge actionable. This year, we're introducing online innovation briefings. They're custom curated quarterly updates that examine consumer trends, emerging technologies, and disruptive innovation. Each 2-hour session includes a keynote address, guest speakers, and a facilitated workshop designed to explore potential business implications, score urgency, and define action items. Feel free to reach out because we'd love to talk to you about how we can help you create value and drive growth. With roughly 3 billion users, Facebook is by far the world's largest social network. While its power as an advertising platform is undeniable, it's also embroiled in several high-profile lawsuits, and somehow it seems to find itself in the center of every geopolitical conversation. Considering everything that's going on right now, I am so grateful that Carolyn Everson, Vice President of Facebook's Global Business Group, has agreed to join us today. Carolyn, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelly. I'm thrilled to be here, although I wish we were in person. I remember our chat fondly from last CES. And God, how the world has changed.
The world has changed. And speaking of that, look, the elephant in the room, it started with Twitter giving President Trump a timeout. And then you guys said, okay, we're suspending Facebook and Instagram. And then they suspended Twitter, said you're gone. And all of a sudden, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. Apple, Google, Reddit, Snapchat, on and on and on. So you've got good company. The big question I think everybody really wants to ask is, why now? Like, this has been going on for a while. Like, why now?
I think Mark said it best in his post, Shelly, and I'd encourage everyone who hasn't to have a chance to read that. And he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but the risks of allowing President Trump to continue to use our service during this period where we are trying to get to the inauguration and a potential peaceful transition of power, the risks were simply too great. And so we blocked him indefinitely. You know, at Facebook, we stand for free speech. We want political speech to be shared, but not at the expense of violence. And what we had take place last week was a sitting president that was glorifying perpetrators of violent acts. That is an unprecedented situation that we've had in this country, and we felt that we needed to do everything we can to ensure that we removed that content and the ability for that to continue to happen over the course of at that point, 13 days.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. The follow-on question I don't know how to avoid. He's not the only person on Facebook who's a world leader who's done this. And so why not all the others?
We have taken action on other leaders. I'm not going to name each one of them, but I can assure you that leaders that have given disinformation around COVID or make hateful remarks about the LGBT community, those posts come down. And we follow policy across the globe around this. What we had last week was an act of violence that was in the midst of occurring. It was actually occurring when these policy decisions, decisions based on our policies, I should say, were being made. And we had a sitting president glorifying the perpetrators of violence. And that really led us to take unprecedented action. It is not a very easy, it might be viewed as, oh, yes, that's a very easy and simple decision. But let's face it, we have taken the leader of the free world off of Facebook that reaches 3 billion people. That is a significant action. And we felt it was warranted and justified given the violence that was occurring.
So I'm going to agree with you because I happen to agree with you personally, but there are plenty of people who don't agree. Does big tech have too much power to change our lives, to rule the world? Are they, because those people are off the grid now and they're not coming back.
When violence is at play, which is what was occurring here, dramatic actions need to be taken. And we do throw people off of the platform regularly. The way to think about it is there's varying degrees of offenses that you would have, just like varying degrees of if you got into trouble with the law, right? You might do some civil disturbance or you might commit murder. And there's everything in between. And so some people get warnings when they do something wrong on Facebook. Some people get 24-hour blocks from features. Sometimes they are completely removed. And in this case, we believe the immediate threat to the peaceful transition of power and the glorification of perpetrators of violence warranted an indefinite suspension. And we have been very aggressive on trying to get this type of hateful content and these groups down. We took very strong action on QAnon, who is no longer allowed on our platforms. We have taken action on Proud Boys. We obviously are constantly looking for this type of behavior and removing it. But honestly, Shelly, it's a cat and mouse game because, one group starts and we get them off and then another one attempts to break the rules. And so it's an ongoing battle. It's really a battle that combines machine learning and humans in order to keep people safe.
So it's interesting. We had Barak Turovsky from Google talk to us about the complexity of language across the world and how hard it is to do monolingual AI understanding and then bilingual translations and how difficult context is for AI. So it's hard to imagine that this is even a surmountable problem if Google can't solve it and they want to. They're financially motivated. I think the stat is that 20% of the people on planet Earth speak English, but 50% of the internet is in English. So if they could work that out, they'd be making money hand over fist. They're trying to work it out and they're having trouble with it. So how is Facebook, which has a fraction of the words to translate that Google does, how are you guys going to be able to approach this?
So we have now, given the last few years, we have ramped up our machine learning and our language capabilities quite substantially. We operate in dozens of languages. We have reviewers now based all around the globe. So they're not just in specific geographies. And the machines learn. They learn from taking actions. That's why policy decisions are so significant because a group of humans sitting in California or London or Sao Paulo or Singapore can make a policy decision, but then can people actually implement it at scale and at the pace at which content gets put up, right? Humans have to translate that policy. The machines have to understand that policy. And so this is going to be a forever war. I would describe this as a policy implementation war that tech is going to be in to ensure that people are as safe as possible and violence is really, as best as it can be, removed immediately from the platform.
Yeah, look, the volume and velocity of posts has just increased. It will always increase.
Correct.
I wish this was the only problem we had to talk about today, Carolyn. We could spend hours talking about this.
Yes.
And I'd like to. But the pandemic is raging. More people passed away in the United States today than practically any other day. We're seeing case volumes at hospitals are pressed to their limits. And I said at the beginning of this hour that, we're going to get through it, but the next 8 to 10, 12 months, no matter how good we do, are going to be brutal. And aside from a lot of things Facebook may be, and aside from all the issues I could bring up about hate speech and violence and banning people, Facebook is still the largest advertising platform for small businesses in the world and one of the easiest to use. If there was ever a time, and I don't, you guys are featured partners, and full disclosure, I don't want to like make this a commercial for you guys, but there's no way around this. Facebook is a method that a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, a big business owner can use to drive volume, drive velocity of their sales, and create value. And it would be wrong not to bring that up and to talk a little bit about, or to ask you actually, are you guys doing anything different right now that would help us through the pandemic? Because every small business in America is under stress they haven't been under ever.
First of all, I couldn't agree more. And I also think your statement that the next 8 to 12 months are going to be fairly brutal. I think we all anxiously awaited that turn of December 31st at midnight. And the reality is, things are not going to look better in the short term for people that are being faced with the pandemic and the other challenges that we have. So let me first talk a little bit about our approach to the pandemic, and then I'll weave into what I think businesses and the support we're offering businesses. So just to set the stage, believe it or not, COVID was declared a public health emergency last January. So we're approaching the year anniversary of that. And Mark held a meeting with his senior leadership, and he asked a really important question, which I think is a question every business leader should ask, during crises. He said, what decisions do we need to make today that if we don't, we will regret not making them in 2 to 3 weeks, right? To push for urgency. Like, okay, you've got a platform with multi-billion people. What do we need to do? And the first thing, and I really actually think this was maybe one of the very first times, I've been at Facebook 10 years, where we really understood the power of our platform, not just to get misinformation, but to get accurate information up. And we built the COVID-19 Information Center. We've had over 2 billion people go to that center. We're actively removing false claims about the vaccines that are debunked by public health experts. We've given the WHO, UNICEF, the CDC unlimited ads to make sure that they can get their messaging out. So this is a full-on, full-on effort to ensure that we can help people through this awful pandemic. But we also recognize that we might be one of the most important platforms to help people get the economic relief that they need to, especially for small businesses. And so one of the things that during that meeting with Mark, that infamous meeting in early 2020, was the realization that businesses were going to get shut down from a brick and mortar standpoint. You and I were not going to walk into our local businesses and be able to buy things the way we were. Like, that was pretty clear based on what was happening in China. And so he asked us to accelerate our efforts to really allow any type of business to become e-commerce enabled. And so Facebook Shops launched. So that was one initiative. And we're just going to continue to improve upon that. It was, we rushed that out very quickly in 2020. Many brick and mortar businesses that we never imagined could suddenly be e-commerce enabled. I'm sure you have some in your local neighborhood where you were not ordering online from those businesses before. You weren't taking out. It was a physical experience, and suddenly they became digital. So that's one area. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars for training and grants, particularly grants for minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and then we did another $100 million for Black-owned businesses, which are getting disproportionately really hurt. And then what we're trying to do is market and think about how do we package some of the great stories. And so I was really proud of the effort, right? Instead of having Black Friday, the way we've had Black Friday for, I don't know the history of it, but for many decades, we launched Buy Black Friday, BUY. And the idea was to try to highlight as many Black-owned businesses as possible on our platform and really encourage people to buy from those businesses. So what we've learned is that whatever analyst, and you certainly talk to probably way more than I do, but everyone's talking about we've accelerated or compressed, I should say, 10 years of e-commerce growth into just a few months. And 77% of global CEOs say they've accelerated their digital transformation plans. So the world, we knew this was going to go on for the next 5 to 10 years, and now people are being forced to do so. If you're a small business watching this, a few things. A, we have a lot of free tools. 200 million businesses use our tools for free. Of the 200 million, 10 million actually buy ads. So 190 million don't buy ads. They just utilize our tools. So we have free and paid tools, and you don't need $1 million. As a matter of fact, our system is so unique that you can spend $5 or 5 million or anything in between. It just depends on your business and size and the needs that you have. And what we do when you go into our ads manager system is we just ask you a really important question. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to reach new customers? Are you trying to make existing customers aware of a new product or promotion or service? In the case of small businesses, are you a restaurant where you had an email list and a dedicated list of customers, and now you just want to let them know that you're going to have takeout or online ordering available? Do you want to drive sales? What do you want to do? Our system asks you that. It's the objective. From there, it's about building great creative. And thanks to the amazing phones we all have in our pocket, you can build great creative on your phone and great video that's enticing. And then you've just got to think about reducing friction. How do I quickly get the customer to do what I need them to do without sending them through long forms to fill out and multiple clicks of website pages? How do I reduce friction? And that's really been the recipe. And so we really believe that our role is to help dramatically increase the economic recovery of small businesses and communities. And our teams are incredibly focused on that.
In one way, it's self-serving for Facebook because obviously it drives some commerce for you guys, but it's so important for every business owner right now. Digital transformation is kind of misnamed, right? It's a catch-all phrase for everything. We're digitally transforming. But as you so well articulated, and as I think a lot of people who are here today know, if you weren't on your way towards really reducing friction, using data to drive sales, understanding your customers, being able to put your message in front of the right person, right place, right time, if you weren't on that path before this started, catching up has been really hard. And
Yes.
Supply chain's been problematic too for a lot of organizations because there's been a little supply shock. That seems, at least for the moment, to have eased up a bit. So now it's right back to trying to drive volume and velocity at retail. What would you suggest to a small business who just now is finding themselves in a place where they don't know where to go, but we're in a world where they have to be digital? What would the first steps be?
So there were 2 restaurants in my hometown of Montclair that were faced with this scenario last year. And I worked with both of them. We get Facebook credits as Facebook employees. And so we're allowed, and frankly, not even just allowed, we're encouraged to make sure that we are helping small businesses or nonprofits with their campaigns. And so in the first example, it's an Italian restaurant named De Novo. They had a website, but of course their business turned upside down because their business was about you going to the restaurant and having that experience. And they wanted to drive awareness around their contactless curbside pickup and delivery. And so with a budget of about a little less than $100, we said, okay, they just want to tell people that this is available, right? We're open for business. You can come and get your delivery, contactless curbside pickup. They reached over 90,000, close to 90,000 people within a 5-mile radius of the restaurant. They gave customers the option to view the menu, get directions, and click to call to actually place an order. And so those were some very basic steps where the business did have a website. So I guess if you're a business that doesn't even have a website, but you have a Facebook presence, the first thing I would say is just think about what is the most important objective. Ads Manager will walk you through it. And if you say your number one objective is, look, I just need to get more customers, so reach. Then it'll ask you the geography within what radius, right? It'll ask you through interest, and the Ads Manager will walk you through. And again, we have 10 million advertisers, 190 million just use our free tools, as I mentioned, but you can really leverage Facebook advertising for very little money. And the system is set up to give you the best result for the least amount of budget. It's the most opposite thing that most media companies I've ever worked on. Most media companies are all about how much revenue can we get?
Sure.
We're the opposite, which is we want to take as little of your money because yes, if we deliver results, we know people are going to come back and use it.
Carolyn, before I let you go, Facebook is in the center of every geopolitical conversation, every single one. And this is a time where I don't think I know what Facebook thinks about what we think about Facebook. And what I mean by that is there's calls every day to regulate it. Mark has said, go ahead and regulate us.
Yes.
But there are calls to regulate social media every day. What should that look like? Like from where you guys sit, what would the right outcome be?
So we have actually outlined 4 areas that we think the government should play a greater role. One is harmful content, right? Setting clear guidelines around which content should be removed and which shouldn't. You know, we opened this segment by talking about, you know, removing some content from President Trump and suspending him indefinitely. But every day there is content removed from Facebook. And you know what? There's usually 2 sides of that coin. People that fundamentally agree with that decision and people think that we have too much power and we've censored them. So it would be helpful for government to actually have more clear guidance on harmful content. We think privacy. You know, the EU has done a really strong job here, leading with GDPR. We need to have more regulation in the United States that protects people's privacy, but also allows personalized advertising to continue. You know, we didn't get into the discussion around Apple, but Apple has somehow created this story out there that you can't have privacy in personalized advertising. It's fundamentally not true. And Apple's own practices should be examined around that. But the government needs to step in, I believe, on privacy.
We're going to talk about Apple in a second, but keep going because we're going to get back to that in one sec.
Fine. Data portability, right? Are you giving consumers the right to move their data across different platforms? I think that's an area where the government should play. And I think the government should also play a role in election integrity. You know, what is allowed, advertising around elections, the whole topic around that. So those are 4 areas. You know, we don't believe we should be making these decisions on our own. It's why Mark has been consistent asking for regulation. And, you know, we believe that the internet is at the heart of how we solve today's global problems. You said we're in the middle of every geopolitical. Yes, we are, because that is what technology has afforded us to do. I wouldn't still be working at Facebook or in technology if I didn't believe that we actually have the ability to really solve many of today's global problems. But I completely understand and even share a lot of the concerns that people have about tech companies and data-driven services. So frankly, the internet needs new rules fit for the digital age.
Yeah, I think that's right. We always talk about Section 230 as, are you a publisher or are you a platform? And the Apple question, I want to touch on, and then we're going to end with 230 because I know we've gone way too long. But Apple's privacy position is well known. They are marketing themselves as the privacy organization. To put it in the most polite way, it's 2 tech giants arguing with one another, and no one seems to really be in that. What people are not understanding is that putting the right message in front of the right person, right place at the right time includes ads, relevant content, and making the quality of your enjoyment of your experience better. That's the good side. The bad side is that the same recommendation engine that gives you the right movie or a bunch of content you might like, or puts the things in front of you that are in front of your friends, also builds echo chambers, creates confirmation bias at a level that we've never seen in history, and is all terrible. So there's 2 sides of that coin too. And in the middle of it is the Apple organization and Facebook saying, well, we're going to fight over how we identify who's who. Discuss.
Look, I can't overstate the magnitude of these changes that Apple is contemplating on businesses and, frankly, the entire digital ecosystem. Apple is single-handedly impacting the way millions of businesses, particularly small businesses, are going to reach their customers. And they've done it without clarity or clear communication. Go back to that Italian restaurant example that I had. They need to reach customers within a 5-mile radius. They want to reach their existing customers to tell them about their new service. That is a good service. We want that Italian restaurant to be doing that. And Apple is somehow conflating that you cannot respect people's privacy along with personalized advertising. We fundamentally disagree with the approach. We believe that personalized ads and privacy, user privacy, can absolutely coexist. But I'll tell you what's at stake here. The free internet is at stake. Okay, it's at total risk because if entrepreneurs and creators can't rely on advertising to make money, they will be forced to turn to other revenue streams to stay in business. And that pretty much means charging people for things that used to be free. Morning news apps, games, comedy shows, charging people for subscription or in-app payments. And I think that is going to fundamentally alter the entire digital landscape, and it is going to be bad for consumers, not just small businesses, not just for app developers, but for consumers who are going to be forced to pay for things that they're used to getting free from advertising. I really believe that their whole iOS 14 position, it's positioned as privacy, but it's really about profit. If Apple forces the app economy to shift to subscriptions and in-app payments, people lose and Apple wins. They conveniently tax businesses at 30 to 15%. The more businesses that shift to that, the more revenue is going to Apple. And Apple isn't playing by its own rules. I really believe Apple is behaving anti-competitively. And, we are going to continue to stand up to this behavior. And we are trying to do it, yes, not just for Facebook, but frankly, it's for the millions of small businesses and people that are going to be seriously impacted by these changes. So we're deeply concerned. Apple is trying to be the judge and jury of the digital ecosystem.
Wow. Okay. We can't leave it there because I've got one last question for you. The 26 words that enable the internet are the salient passage in section 230. Is Facebook a publisher? Is Facebook a platform? Are you a gum or a candy?
This is the age-old debate. Section 30 is part of a law, as you know, that was passed in 1996. It's 25 years old, and it needs to be updated to better reflect how society and technology have changed. It was designed, as you mentioned, to protect free expression on the internet. And we believe that any new version of that law needs to do the same thing. But it also needs to address, I think, the things that maybe the internet founders didn't fully anticipate. It needs to be like platforms like ours. We need to be able to eliminate hate speech and harassment that harms its users without penalty. And we need to be able to adhere, as well as other platforms, to clear and transparent standards for how, and just as important, why we remove that content. I know this is easier said than done. Anytime a rule like this needs to be revisited, but we agree the current regulatory framework isn't working. It's time to update it, and we are fully supportive of a bipartisan effort to do so.
Well, Carolyn, I agree. Section 230 is asking you to make a choice that makes no sense in the 21st century. Are you a publisher or are you a platform? And the answer is you're probably a little bit of both, as is every major tech company, as is every company that collects and uses data. So hopefully the new legislators and the new administration, they'll do their job as lawmakers, and maybe we'll see some progress. Look, this has been a really, really tough couple of weeks, and the year has been insane, but you still, I know, are very optimistic by nature. So tell me something good.
So I am, despite all of the terrible things that seem to be going on, both personally and professionally, I will say my optimism comes from getting to work every day with entrepreneurs and businesses making so many of these positive changes, right? We saw it early in the pandemic with auto manufacturing plants that suddenly retooled to make ventilators, or beverage companies creating hand sanitizer. But we're seeing it now with the explosion of entrepreneurial energy. As difficult of an environment as it is for small businesses, last quarter, more new businesses were started in America than at any time ever. Wow. So there is a tremendous amount of reinvention going on here. And I know it feels like a slog, and it does. And if you're in the middle of it and you're trying to keep on your own business, you probably wonder day by day, are you going to make it? But if you look throughout history, and history is always the most important teacher, I believe, this tends to be the moment when things are really, really difficult that entire new industries and businesses are born. Disney was born during the Depression. GE, GM, and HP were born during deep recessions. And so I want people to leave this with optimism that if you've just invented your business, or if you're reinventing your business and you need help, you can find customers, you can get your business back on track. And there have been many moments where I've talked to small businesses and they thought it was over. and then they start to think about what does that reinvention look like. And I think everyone has it in them. So I want to leave people with some optimism that this might be the time where you could create the best business you never even thought you were even capable of doing.
Carolyn Everson, Vice President of the Global Business Group at Facebook. I cannot thank you enough for spending time with us today.
Thank
All the
you,
best,
Shelly.
All righty,
Okay.
we'll talk soon.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank our featured partners, Samsung, Facebook, and Google for their support, and my personal thanks to the teams at Samsung, Facebook, and Google who worked behind the scenes to make this event possible. And I also want to thank you so very, very much for spending time with us today. For all of us at the Palmer Group, I'm Shelly Palmer. Stay safe.